Hi everyone, and welcome to our regression testing webinar today, your early warning system. My name is Tory Bueller. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. I'm going to give everyone just a few minutes to join. We still have people who are signing in. Just be patient. We're going to get started in just a minute or two. We're really excited about today's presentation. It's full of information for you guys. So again, in a minute or two, we'll get started with some housekeeping, and then we'll jump right in. All right, welcome to everyone who's just signing in. Again, I'm going to give everyone just another 30 seconds or so before we get started. Okay. All right, so again, welcome everyone to our regression testing webinar. Before we get started, I'm going to go over just a few housekeeping items. So if this is your first time with us, you know exactly how this works, how you can communicate, and how to ask any questions. As you already know, you're currently muted, so we can't hear you, but you can hear us, hopefully. So just to make sure that you can hear us, I'd like everyone to just write into the questions that you can hear us okay. Hey, how are you? Happy Thursday. Tell us if you're excited for the weekend, where you are in the world. I'm currently in Colorado Springs, Colorado. We've got some folks in Missoula and Anaconda, I believe, Garrett, as well as Denver and Utah, all over the place. So go ahead, write in there. Let us know that you can hear us. And as you're doing that, this is where you guys are going to be communicating with us. So if you do have any questions at all today, please make sure that you throw them in there. We're going to be monitoring. As you can see, we've got everybody under the sun on this webinar today to help with any questions that you may have. So please go ahead and write them in there. Looks like we got a lot of people. We got someone from Germany. Welcome. Denver, Charlottesville, Missoula again, Milwaukee. Awesome. Great. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you on. So the next thing that we're going to do for housekeeping is I'm going to show you guys a poll that we're going to be doing. We won't be doing too many today, but just so you guys are aware of how it works and what it'll look like. So this will also give us a better idea of who you guys are. So I've just released one of our polls. It's what role are you? IT manager, admin, developer, program, project manager, product manager. Let us know what your role is. It helps us to kind of cater this conversation more towards you guys so that you guys get more out of it. Awesome. We've got a lot of admins on, project managers. Awesome. Okay, just a couple more minutes and I'll close that out. So we'll just do one other poll kind of midway through this presentation today. But this is what it'll look like. This is how you'll interact with us and we'll be good to go. All right. So we'll share out our poll results like this. You'll be able to see. Looks like we've got mostly admins and managers of some sort on today. Happy to have y'all here. All right. So next up, I would love to introduce our speakers for today. So Stephen Crane is going to be our first speaker of the day. He's an experienced product manager that joined the Prodly team early last year. He has led and delivered a plethora of concept to launch software introductions for mid to enterprise sized companies. He is our quarterback, coach, cheerleader, you name it, for company-wide product launches or CPQ projects for release management. He owns our entire flagship Apox solution and all things release management. An excellent resource to us, and we're so glad to have him on today. And then our next speaker for today, let me change slides, is Garrett Pierce. So Garrett is a lead quality assurance consultant for ATG, and since joining the team in 2017, he's worked extensively with customers on system testing when deploying complicated solutions like CPQ, billing, DocuSign, Conga, you name it. He knows most, if not all, of the automation tools needed for regression testing or a perfect process there. So we're lucky to have his knowledge and expertise on today. And for the remainder of us, the other three ladies here on, we are, I'll introduce myself first. So I'm Tory Bueller. I'm Director of Events for Prodly. I help arrange all the webinars, all of our physical events, anything like that. Then we've got Susie, who is our Director of Partner Alliances, and Gracie Sanford, who is the Director of Partner Alliances at ATG. So we all wanted to be on today for our short introductions. Basically, we all have cats and we love them, things like that. Susie is located in Denver. Gracie is located in, remind me, Gracie, where are you at?
Missoula, Montana.
Perfect. So just quick introduction from us, letting you know who we are and how we apply to this webinar today. So we'll be on the background and answering questions as they come in. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass things off to Stephen, and Gracie, Susie, and I are going to get off camera so that we don't take away. So enjoy, guys.
Awesome. Hey guys, thanks for joining. We're super excited to have you on, and we're going to talk about a specific type of software application testing on today's webinar. We have myself and Garrett, who's going to guide you through some best practices that you can begin implementing, and then hopefully we make this learning enjoyable and fun for you. And feel free to ask questions as we go along. So let's kick it off. So we realize there's lots of different types of testing, right, that's performed in the Salesforce ecosystem. We're specifically focused on regression testing on the topic of today's webinar. Now, why is that? Well, as you know, orgs and Salesforce environments are highly dynamic environments. They're changing all the time. You have admins in there making declarative changes. You have developers in there coding, making metadata changes. And these teams are interacting with each other, and changes are being made all the time and deployed to different environments. And you're running multiple different projects. So it becomes increasingly important that you make sure the state of the org is intact, right? That there's no changes that are being introduced that are going to adversely affect existing changes or existing code and configuration within the org. So, right, quite simply, regression testing is a type of software testing to confirm that a recent configuration update through a deployment, or it could be a code push or a release, has not adversely affected existing functionality. Now let's talk about the overall wheel here and what regression testing allows you to do. Allows you to test for unexpected errors that have been introduced and that might be impacting existing functionality in a lower environment before changes are pushed up to a higher environment. A dev sandbox, a UAT, a QA environment before those changes are pushed to production. You can check and recheck those various components as part of your release management process following the update or the push of code or configuration changes to the higher level environment to make sure things are working as expected. So if you're CPQ customers, imagine changes that you're making to the product catalog on a regular basis and implementing those changes in an org, price rules that you're adjusting. If you're running some sort of pricing promotion, right, and you're discounting a wide variety of products and you're pushing those changes out, and then the promotion period ends, so then you have to reintroduce and deactivate certain price rules too because the promotional period ends. So a wide array of use cases that impact the configuration changes that you're making in your orgs, and you want to be testing for those things as you're deploying these changes on a regular basis. And all that to say, it helps you minimize the impact to your critical business applications and processes that run your business. If you're a CPQ customer, if you're using FSL, really any of the Salesforce managed apps and products that you've purchased, your business is relying on those systems being intact and working. And any change that's introduced, large or minor, could impact those workflows and could impact business processes. So let's talk about briefly where this type of testing methodology falls within the Agile release management flow. Garrett will cover more in depth the practices you can begin implementing, the tools you can use, but I'll cover at a high level here you can see from this diagram, regression testing is performed as such. So typically you'd have a test suite or a set of test cases that you are collecting and grouping together, test cases which are defining the test paths, the specific test criteria that you want to validate for new features that you might be introducing. And you would run that test case or those suite of test cases in a lower environment. You would then push out the changes through a deployment, and then you'd run through those same test suites in the higher level environment, because you want to make sure that any net new configuration you're introducing in your higher level environment isn't adversely affecting the previous release, the previous features, the previous build that was released prior. That way you can ensure existing functionality is working as expected, and detect if there's that code push or that change has introduced any net new bugs or issues you might need to remedy, so that your team can prioritize the fixes. And all that to say that there's also challenges that are introduced with regression testing, and Garrett will cover as to the specific tools that you can use and the types of processes you can implement to help make it much more easier and streamline it for your business. Are there any questions there? Do we want to stop? And before we move on here, let me see. If you have questions, definitely shoot them over to us.
No questions. No questions so far, Stephen, but I am monitoring the Q&A panel, and
Awesome.
we'll make sure to pipe up if a question comes up that's timely.
All right, cool. Thanks, Susie. All right, we're going to pass it over to Garrett.
Cool. Well, hello, everyone. Just wanted to thank you guys for coming on today and proudly for having me. So we're talking about regression testing today, and I just really wanted to give you guys kind of my perspective, kind of looking through the eyes of an SI and ATG. So regression testing is something that is pretty common on every implementation we do. We do it during deployments and data migration, as well as requirement changes and big software version updates. So we want to do regression testing because when these big changes come out, we want to make sure that the functionality that we have built, is still working. So we strive as an SI to deliver a quality project or quality product, and regression testing is one of the safeguards that we have to, ensure that we're doing just that. And I always like to sneak in a couple similes in there, but what's the point of building a car if the ignition works, or what's the point of putting an air conditioner in a house if it makes the lights not work? So it's just kind of something to think about. All right. So, obviously there's some challenges with regression testing, and one of those being it's very time consuming. Regression testing can take a lot of time to complete, and it usually involves running a lot of existing tests that you've already ran in the past. And as a tester, I can tell you, like that can be really frustrating to go and have to run the same tests over and over and over again, and it just really feels like you're kind of spinning your wheels. And a lot of the time it's a pretty big lift, and it gets put on a group of people or a single person, which I've been in both situations. And kind of hand in hand with that time consumption is it's going to be very high cost. The more man hours you burn, the more resources you have tied up in regression testing. Obviously that money's got to come from somewhere. So, the more people and the more time, the more it's going to cost you. The next thing is can be very complex. Working in an agile environment like a lot of us do, the software tends to really kind of get convoluted, and more and more it builds on itself as we go through the process, and the later on you get through the project, it just really kind of builds on itself. And as you start your initial testing, you probably more times than not, you're going to find a lot more tests that you're going to have to run just because of the complexity of the testing that you've already gone through. And probably the biggest point here that I want to talk about with challenges is communicating the business value. And what I mean by that is, one of the hardest things that as we have to deal with as an SI is selling that value of regression testing to our client stakeholders. A lot of the times the client stakeholders that we work with are pretty non-technical people. That doesn't mean they're incompetent. They're obviously really good at running projects and managing people. But one of the things they don't really understand is kind of the importance of regression testing. And when we have, maybe a change order comes through and the client wants us to be doing, more work or change the work that we're doing, that obviously is going to come with some regression testing. And when we're trying to make that deal and get that deal sold off to our clients to make sure that we can, move forward with this, with the change in the work, so they're going to want to kind of look at what we're doing and try to cut costs where they can. They're going to take a look at regression testing and say, oh, well, why do you need to be retesting things that you've already tested? That just kind of sounds like a waste of time, but, you have to communicate that, when these changes come through, obviously things can break, and some functionality might break existing functionalities. So something that we have to be, really convey the point that it's really important to have. And sometimes that's kind of a battle with the client. And you just kind of have to maybe even demo it to them, just show them the importance. And sometimes they'll just want to forego that testing. And at that point, really all you can do is just convey the risk of not doing that testing and the risk that they're going to take on by not doing it. So the more you can educate them, usually the better that turns out for you. So we can move on to the next slide here. So now with the challenges out of the way, I really want to talk to you guys about the best practices. These are some of the things that I try to do on every project, and whether it's your first regression test run or maybe your 100th, if you can kind of model this and go through it, I think you'll kind of realize that it turns out to be pretty helpful. So what you want to do first is you want to make sure that you're regularly updating your regression suite. And what I mean by regression suite is it's a collection of test cases that are performed as each new software update is completed. So you want to make sure that whenever you're doing functional testing or unit testing, you're tracking it down somewhere. So more oftentimes than not, you're going to be coming back to use those same test cases. So you want to make sure that you're tracking those ones down. Older versions of functionality that's might be obsolete. You want to make sure that you're clearing those out of your regression suite. You don't want to delete them outright, but you want to make sure that you're archiving those somewhere. So you want to focus on your high traffic areas. So working with clients, we need to take a look at the business users and what they're going to be, what functionality that we're building they're going to be using on a day-to-day basis. Because that's going to be the most frequent area of where our test cases need to be targeted to, because obviously we want the happy path for what they are doing the work, right? So you want to include that basic functionality, most popular features. Also, you want to take a look at defects. So anything that's broken in the past, it's pretty good chance that if some big change comes through and you do have to do regression testing, that defect will probably rear its head again. So make sure you're doing that. One thing you can do is you can kind of try to set up a prioritization matrix, within Excel or Smartsheets or whatever it is, and just write down, either functionality or certain test cases, and just try to rank those. Make sure this one's more important than this one. Defects obviously is going to be a pretty high priority, so you want that up there. Negative testing is probably not as important, so you maybe want to put that on the back burner because, I mean, face it, we probably don't have enough time to run 100% of our test cases, so we're going to have to kind of trim the fat in some places. So that brings me to the next point, which is automation. Automation just can really improve the efficiency of regression testing. And generally with automation, it's going to take more resources out. It's going to lessen the time that it takes to actually get through your testing. And it's just one thing that, if you can forego the initial setup costs of creating your test cases, it really will show the return on investment long term if it's something that you're going to be using, quite often. And then the next thing is you want to set goals. So, set up a target. You want to set up some metrics to meet. Maybe it's you want to meet. Regression test B is more efficient than regression test A because it had less defects. Or anything even as simple as a pass-fail rate. You just want to have something in mind, so when you actually go through this process, you actually know that you're making a difference and making some headway. And then plan just kind of wraps up all these points that I've already talked about. But when you go into regression testing, you want to have a plan, because you won't want to get to day of regression testing and say, oh, well, I have a ton of work to do and I don't really even know where to start. So one thing that you can set up is, set up a timeline, put it in place and make sure that you're meeting those deadlines. And that can be another thing. If you know your timeline, you know how many tests you need to run. And so that way you're not testing too much, but not testing too little. Obviously you want to make sure that your regression suite's up to date. That's really helpful for us because, I can generally in a regression run go to my suite of test cases, pull out everything I need within 5 minutes, and that's generally the hardest part for a lot of people. So, just minimizing the time that it takes to get that ready is very key. Then you want to focus on your high traffic areas, make sure that the tests that you're running are actually meaningful, make sure that you don't have any old test cases that test old functionality that might be out of date. And then obviously you want to make sure that you're getting everything automated, because that's gonna really make it more efficient for you and probably end up having more test coverage that way. So next slide. Oops.
There's actually a quick question, and it comes from Carl. And Carl says that I've noticed as a QA, a lot of the times the plan or strategy documentation can sometimes fall to the wayside or be completely ignored. How do you recommend emphasizing to a client the importance of these documents?
Yeah, Carl, that's definitely a good question. I think it really just starts with your conversations with the client. Every time that you have a meeting, that you're bringing up these documents and getting them over to them and getting their eyes on it. I think that's generally the first step to keep it in the back of their minds, and then just bring it up regularly and have them invest some time into it. Maybe have them fill out a portion of the test of that strategy for the regression testing, and if they have any resources on it, who are those resources, what exactly is it that they're going to be doing, and just really get their buy-in.
Awesome. So Carl, let us know if that helps, if maybe you feel that that's something that you can implement yourself as well. We'd love your feedback on that.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for that, Tori, and let me know if there's any more. So we're going to go through the ATG process. This is going to cover some of the tools that we use. And so I'm going to start off with Atlas, which Atlas is ATG's own proprietary 14-step methodology for working in an agile environment. And Atlas is it's very important to us, because no matter who the resource is, no matter who the project is, what you're getting with Atlas is consistency, because at any given point within a project, we know where we're at, we know what's coming, and we know what we can prepare for. And then Jira, I know probably 90% of you know what Jira is. It's just a issue tracking software. Most companies use it. We use it on every project that we can. And what it's doing is just really going to be a good handoff from the ICs to the QA. It keeps the team organized. It keeps everything on the forefront, all the bugs on the forefront. Everyone knows what the defects are, as well as, it also allows a client, some pretty good transparency into what progress we're making and where we're at. So next I want to cover TestRail. TestRail is going to be the most important tool that ATG QA utilizes, and we utilize this on as many projects as we can as well. I would probably say 95% of our projects we're using TestRail. But what it is for us is TestRail is a test case management tool. It's something where every single test that we run, it's logged within TestRail. And that's what's going to make it really easy for us to set up a regression run, is because we have all those test cases in there. We know when they were ran and what needs to be ran within a regression run. So it's pretty quick for us to just grab those and go. It also has our defects and everything in there too as well. And so I really do want to talk about automation here, because one thing that I've, really got accustomed to within ATG is, messing around with automation tools. I guess I just find them interesting or something. But Selenium and Catalan, as well as some other automation tools we've used. We've done a lot of proof of concepts as a company. And one thing, I've used Selenium in the past for really long-term client engagement, and what we really used it for was just creating data. And they had a very long, drawn-out Salesforce process of their account, and their opportunity were just absolutely massive in the required fields that you had to enter just to get that data, just to test later. And so we automated that process. We tried automated the testing, but we just really had problems with stuff like iframes and Salesforce and pop-ups. Just really just kind of made Selenium really angry. So one of the things that we kind of think about is our return on investment. Is how long does it take to get ramped up? How long does it take a resource to get trained, to get to a position where they can use this automation to actually achieve a specified result? And that's just something that we've just really had a hard time with, because with these really short-term projects, to get all the tests and use cases up and ready to go, generally it's just easier to use, just manually test it for us. And that's kind of where Apox test comes in. So I've had the pleasure of using Apox and testing it out a little bit, and the first thing I noticed is just the ease of use. Stephen gave me a 20-minute demo, and within another 20 minutes, I was running test runs and creating test cases and actually achieving testable results. And to me, that was big time, because I've never really, without having to spend hours and hours and hours to actually get a test case to run, to actually give me a test result, that was big for me. And the ease of use comes from Apox using APIs instead of a Selenium, Selenium IDE-based framework, or a UI-based click and record framework. So it's actually giving you Salesforce records and field values and actually returning results for you. And that just takes a lot of the headache out of it for you. And this tool is just really, really vital for helping end users keep the agile velocity up, and making sure that release processes get thoroughly tested. So with that said, I want to turn it over to you, Stephen. Obviously, any questions out there, please feel free to ask before Stephen gets going. Tori, is there any out there? I can't really view it.
There's no questions from that, but I do have a question for the audience. It'd be interesting to know what kind of tools you guys are currently using, if you are using tools at all. and just if it's some of these ones, like if you are using TestRail or things like that, or Selenium, we would love to know what you think of them, where they are, really advantageous and where they're not, because that's good for us to know as well. So let us know in the questions and the comments what tools you're using and how you use them and things like that.
Yeah, and sorry, Tori, I didn't key you in, but we do have a poll that have you ever had to have a business value conversation with a stakeholder? So I think that's a really interesting question.
Yeah, actually, I just launched it. So if everyone could take that for us. And then I think that while people are filling that out, it'd be really interesting from you, Garrett and Stephen, if you have any advice for people who are trying to go into this conversation of like, okay, I need to get this process implemented ASAP. How do I go and address this with confidence to, build that trust and show that this is something that we need to the stakeholder?
Right. Yeah. That's a good question, Tori. I think the first thing that you can do is just, do your homework, get prepared, get some actionable items in there, and then even prepare a demo and show like, hey, all this new code that got pushed in the last update, it's breaking all these things, and I think we need to run a regression run to see, what all it did break. So just, provide that value and don't be afraid to say, hey, like there's just going to be a lot of, risk involved if we push this update to production. We might lose a lot of money over this because, our system's not working and it's breaking. So that's one thing I would say is just, do your homework, go in there with some action items and just be prepared to battle it out.
Stephen, is that the same advice that you would have?
Yeah, I was going to say what came to my mind is as much as you can quantify the ROI and gather as many data points, because you're talking to your IT manager or maybe your manager who's maintaining your deployment strategy. You can make a case for how net new changes you're deploying to those environments introduce more risk, right? And how much time you have to spend as a QA analyst to actually build those test cases manually. So finding a tool that helps you do that in the shortest amount of time, that also helps mitigate the risk, makes you more productive. You can build a case for ROI and sell it to your managers and your executives.
Awesome. And so it was pretty even in our poll results of those who, did really well with this and those who maybe it didn't go so well. For those who it went well with, what advice would you give? Write that in as well. And then there is a question in here, and it says, I'm using Pentatoe kettle for reporting. Sorry, I probably butchered that. I'm not familiar with that.
Tahoe kettle, probably.
And data analysis. And it's not a question. It's that uses API too. Okay, that's a cool tool. I'm not familiar with it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll pass it to Stephen now. Sorry.
All right, cool guys. And I apologize too. I've been looking over here because I have the screen and the slides here. So yeah, they should be right in front of me. But we're gonna go on to okay. Let's talk about Apox Test really quickly. So Apox Test is a product that we here proudly released about, I think, a little over a month ago. So new product introduction. It's been in the market for a little over a month. And we built it purpose-built to support business users, QA, who need to perform regression testing for sales low-code applications on the Salesforce platform. So where we didn't focus from the onset was trying to build a UI-based testing app, right? There's plenty of high-quality tools on the market that you can use that help you do that. We really wanted to focus and narrow in on some of the core problems that our customers were coming to us with. And those were problems around how do I test the underlying business logic of CPQ? Lots of our customers are using CPQ to deploy record data from org to org. And as part of that deployment methodology, they're either not doing any testing or they are doing testing and it's very manual and it's very tedious. So we built this tool to help those users automate the process, make it much more easier to build test cases, to test pre-configured quotes, and as Garrett mentioned, report back the record values from existing quotes. So you can determine if those quotes are generating the expected values. So you can test things like, are my net amounts correct? Are my list amounts correct? Are the number of quote lines that are generated on a quote the correct amounts? So any managed fields or custom fields that you have implemented in your org, you can select from and apply in your tests. And that way you can then determine, or well, rather you can group those test cases and execute them within a test run at different points in time. And what our application is going to do for you is snapshot a set of values in a test case that then you can run at a later point in time and then compare where the differences might be in the reported results. So if you ran a test case, prior to Salesforce releasing an update and then after Salesforce releasing an update, and you notice that the values reported for a quote haven't been user modified, but have been modified and are now changing, you can get to the bottom as to what's going on. Maybe some price rules have been impacted. Maybe you have some customizations in your org, which many customers do. Lots of CPQ implementations are highly customized. Maybe you're using a QCP or an extension on top of Salesforce CPQ to build some custom pricing, to solve custom pricing use cases. So by authoring these test cases declaratively, running them at multiple points in time, you can see the differences reported in the record values on quotes. And our app it's API based, so it's invoking existing public APIs. So it's the quote calculate API, and we're snapshotting those values for you and reporting them so you can run them and easily see where the failures are being reported. So that becomes your early warning system as you go through and perform testing, inter-cycle, as you're making changes and deploying them throughout an org, but also helps you stage up a broader strategy for testing changes prior to Salesforce CPQ releasing an update, which I believe is coming out soon.
Yeah, the next CPQ major release will actually start to be pushed to production on July 10th. The sandbox code became accessible to everyone, I believe at the end of last week. So this is definitely timely. I have not read the release notes myself, nor as an alliances person would I probably deeply understand them. But given all of the relationships that the various objects have within the CPQ managed package, this is definitely relevant.
Thanks, Susie. All right, cool. Did we want to pause here for questions? Should I move on to the next slide?
No questions about it yet, but they may have it after they see it live.
Okay. All right. I'll talk about broadly Apox and our bold vision for our product and the services that we offer. For those who are familiar with our application and then where we came from and our homegrown roots is our former product Mover, we rebranded as part of a longer strategy and a longer term plan to not just solve data migration use cases on the Salesforce platform, but a comprehensive suite of solutions so that non-technical users and admins can easily build and make declarative changes even easier on the Salesforce platform. So for example, in the context of CPQ, yes, you can go through and point and click and build price rules and product rules, and it's all declarative and there's no coding, but the CPQ data schema is very highly complex and relational, so it is still very cumbersome clicking through the UI. So our ultimate vision is to provide tools that enable users to do that very easily, and then test those changes very easily in an automated fashion so that they can align these processes with their broader deployment and release management strategy internally in-house. So Apox test we released about a little over a month ago. Apox release is our existing product that helps automate deployments of relational record data or configuration data. We also call it reference data on the Salesforce platform. And we're enhancing it with version control capabilities so you can take advantage of an existing GitHub repository, later in the future a Bitbucket repository, and version your record changes as you would version metadata and code. So you're applying the same amount of rigor to record data as you would metadata. Because arguably, a missing field or a lookup value in a highly relational data schema, once deployed, if missing, can cause, broad implications. Something as seemingly as that, and is equally as impactful if there was an issue or a bug in code that was released from a dev sandbox to a production environment. So Apox release helps you automate and deploy those changes, while test helps you test the changes. And then in the future, we have plans to introduce tools that help you analyze and audit, an audit trail, making use of the version control systems we're going to integrate with. So you have that audit trail that exists. Large enterprise customers want to know who made changes, when they were made. They have SOX compliance, they have governance and compliance that they have to adhere to when users are making changes within Salesforce environments. So that is our comprehensive wheel, and that is our plan for Apox. If there's questions, we're happy to speak to them and answer them for you. Not, I think we have next. Tory, I think.
Yeah, sure. So what I'll do real quick is we'll go over kind of some of the things we're providing to you, what's coming up, things that you guys can do on top of this. And then if anyone is, with any of other, whoa, what happened? Can someone go back?
Oops.
Sorry, or too far. Okay, we're technical difficulties. Okay. So like I was saying, these will go over the next steps, and at the end, we'll answer any questions that you might have. We'll go ahead and show you, if you're interested, on how this tool works live. Since that release is coming up here soon, you guys might have a need for it. So if you do want to see the product be used live, we'll do that at the very end. But really quickly, if you do want to do a custom demo, if you can't stay on any longer, we've got just follow this website. I'm going to give you guys all of our slides, as well as some follow-up materials tomorrow. So look for that email, go ahead and register, get a custom demo from us if you do want to see this, if it's going to be helpful for you in the future. And with that, I'm going to actually pass off to Gracie to talk a little bit about Atlas, as well as some of the events that ATG is doing.
Awesome, yeah. So you heard Garrett mention Atlas and our methodology in how we believe in doing implementations at ATG. And so if you want to find out more, we just threw the slide in here for your reference in the future. But also, you can visit our website and learn a little bit more about that. And the other plug I'll do is with the next slide is about our now virtual quote to cast. Somebody click forward for me.
I got you.
Thanks. And so usually this is a celebration of, people come up to Montana and networking and learning about, quote to cash, and the theme of this year is the future of quote to cash. We have some exciting work that we're doing on the emerging technologies and how they relate to quote to cash. This year it'll be virtual, as with most events, but feel free to register now and kind of get a lay of the land as we continue to develop what that looks like.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Gracie. And so for everyone still on, we've got about 15 minutes left. This is what's going to be open for our Q&A. So if there's any questions that you might have, please type them in now. I know it takes a little while if you do have a long question. So we'll give you the time. We'll stay on. In the meantime, Stephen, do you mind doing that live demo for us? And we'll continue to review those questions, and we'll do them right at the end. It can be quick 5 minutes just to show how the product actually works.
Yeah, I can. Let me get set up really quick, and I'll get it up here.
Thank you.
Nothing quite like a live demo.
Oh, and there's the registration page for quote to cast.
You're still seeing my screen. Okay, I clicked on that as part of that was part of the
Totally on purpose.
Stephen, we have one question, and I don't know if this would better go to Stephen or Garrett. It might be Garrett because he has kind of that QA testing all around experience. The question is, of the different types of testing, so understand there's, regression as well as other kinds of testing that you do in QA, is there some kind of recommended flow or prioritization between those, or are they all kind of equal?
Yeah, I think that just really kind of depends on your situation, right? Because throughout like a normal project, we're going to be doing like unit testing and functional testing. And I mean, we might not even do regression testing depending on the actual situation. But generally, regression testing is probably going to be somewhere towards, the middle to the end, flowing into user acceptance testing at the very tail end of the project. But there is a bit of flow of the types of testing that go on within a project. I hope that
Great.
answers the question. I didn't actually see the question on the chat. Better read it.
All good. It definitely answered the question, and I think that kind of speaks to the importance of having, someone with your expertise and just QA expertise in general, kind of coaching you through the process as you're bringing a new product into your environment, or a product changing into your environment.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's kind of where Atlas helps us out because, as we go through that Atlas methodology, kind of certain steps coincide with certain types of testing. But yeah, there is for sure a flow.
Great, thank you.
Okay, are you guys seeing Podly on the screen?
Yeah.
There? Okay. Okay, cool. I'll give you guys a quick tutorial walkthrough of the test. So gave the background on test, what it is, why we built it. We made it available in the existing managed package. It's available here under a separate app. And so if you're interested in checking it out, I think we have some information, maybe some links if you wanted to trial it or anything. So to start with test, I'm going to create a test template, and a test template is simply a blueprint or a container that houses the record or the fields rather that you want to test and apply to future test cases to be run at later time. So this allows you to, say, if you wanted to test a calculate or a new quote scenario, but then also an amendment or a renewal scenario, you can apply the same set of fields to a template and then apply that template to two different test cases for two separate use cases that you wanted to run. So I'll kind of come in here, I'll give it a name, and we want to test maybe the net total fields. We want to make sure that those fields are generating the right pricing totals based on some price rules that we've set up. I'm going to select the template type as quote, and then I'm going to select the fields that I want to test and apply to the template and save. Save that test template available in the list view here, and then I can apply that test template to a test case. And I like to put the name of the quote that we're testing in the test case, just for future reference. And then what I do is I specify the quote that I want to run the test against. Give it a name, optional description, specify the function I want to test. So calculate, it's going to be calling the calculate quote API. and then I apply the test template that I created earlier and save. Now, upon the initial save, our service is calling the quote calculate API. And if there's some Salesforce documentation out there on the quote calculation stages, highly complex, robust engine that runs through a series of operations. And so there's lots of breakage points, right? Anywhere in that flow. When you calculate a quote, either explicitly through CPQ or modifying quote line items. And so what we're doing is we're snapshotting those values and making those available and storing those in your Salesforce org. So you can see the values here retrieved based on the fields I've applied from the template to the test case. Save those values to your org, and you can see in this case we have a value of 184 million. Yeah, million. So that gets saved. And now what I can do is I can run. But between the time I've saved that test case and the time I've run and executed my test run, if there's been any changes to that particular quote because of any enhancements or changes outside of this test, test will report whether the record values have changed since that gap in time. And that's going to be reported under test runs here. You create a new test run, you can save it and execute it later, or you can execute it at the point in time you create it. And a test run is simply a grouping of test cases. Testing that test case, so one or more test cases can be grouped within a single run and then executed, and then report back the actual results and report back if there's been any failures or if those results pass. So it checks the point in time you execute the run and then compares it to the previous baseline value that was reported for that quote. I can click in here for the test case, drill into the actual details. I can reference the quote, and then I can see the tested field that I applied and then the expected versus actual values that have been returned. So then you can determine if the records have failed, what's actually going on. You can start to do your research and start observing your org and identify what changes have maybe been made that could be causing these values to report different amounts. And that is quick 5-minute overview.
Perfect. Thank you. So we have about 7 minutes left. It doesn't look like we have any questions, but if you do have any questions about the product or you want to see this demo done in your own environment, with your own use case, things like that, we can talk about it in the custom demo. I'll be sending out that link, the slides, the recording to this webinar, all those things you guys are going to receive tomorrow. So if there's no more questions, I'm going to go ahead and give everyone back 7 minutes to their day. Any last minute comments from our speakers? Nope.
Nope, nothing. Then just thanks everyone for joining, and again, thanks Proudly for having me. It was fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, Garrett.
Garrett, Gracie, the ATG team, we are so glad to have you as a partner. You are one of the leading consultants, not just in the Salesforce CPQ ecosystem, but in the Salesforce world as a whole. So we are happy to have you as a partner. And for any clients or prospects out there, I highly recommend you register for Quote to Cast. It's a great event when it's held in person, and I'm sure the team over there is working diligently to replicate that experience as much as possible virtually. Finally, Stephen, it's always great to have you as our product owner presenting. We really do hope that this content was helpful for everyone. Regression testing in the CPQ space is an exciting new place for us to be, and we love getting to work with customers and partners along the way. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Susie.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Like I said, look for that email tomorrow. And with that, have a great rest of your day.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.